Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is CJ. I want to welcome you guys back to part 2 of 3 of my Aquamaxx T1 calcium reactor setup. Now I say 2 of 3 because a few weeks ago I gave you guys the first look at the entire setup. This vid is going to be all about getting this thing installed on my manifold and getting it running. And then the third vid later down the line will be all about tuning it and getting it all dialed in for my system and hopefully the corals I'm going to have in the near future. So over the last few weeks, the main question I had to figure out was how was I going to feed water through this calcium reactor. Now you can use an external pump if you choose, but I didn't want to add additional plugs to my system. So the easiest way for me was going to be to use the existing manifold and the configuration I already have. So basically removing the carbon reactor I had, adding a few pitch connect fittings, and then hopefully fitting the calcium reactor right in its same spot. So before we can go any further, we have to disassemble the calcium reactor so we can fill it with all the required media we're going to need for the next few months. And they made this pretty easy. You know, the screws are threaded in a way to where you just barely have to loosen them up, and you can rotate the lid and it actually unlocks and lets you slide it right out. Now this is pretty much designed like a normal upflow media reactor. Water enters through the top, goes through the bubble plate, and then upwards through the media. Now the pH probe holder and all the other outputs are all safely secured on the lid, so you can put that to the side and put it away for now. So now we can get to the most important part of a calcium reactor, and honestly, the whole reason I want to use one, the media, guys. Now this is going to be the Carib Sea aragonite reactor media. It's the coarser 8-pound jug of it, so it's bigger pieces. But the main reason for using this is the whole reason for a calcium reactor. As this stuff breaks down and melts in the calcium reactor, it releases everything that it's holding. All the magnesium, the calcium, the alkalinity, the strontium, the potassium, all the trace elements that my tank's going to need, they automatically gets released in equal parts in the correct portion. So this is basically going to allow me to put my tank on autopilot, and all the things that I don't understand yet that it needs are going to automatically be dosed. So, you know, this is a great thing for me because it's going to allow me to grow in the hobby and allow my tank to grow at the same time. Now it did take me a few rinses in oil water before I got all of that dust and whatever else was trapped inside of the aragonite clean enough for me to add it to the reactor. You know, the goal was to eliminate as much as I could, so that way, you know, I didn't have to take much time to flush this thing clean on my system. One important thing I forgot, called a rookie mistake, was overfilling the reactor and not leaving enough room for my pH probe. So, you know, remove the cup full and remedy that situation. Now I'm adding a second piece of media, if you guys didn't notice. These are going to be magnesium flakes. Now keep in mind, the ARM media that I already added has magnesium, but these flakes are going to be additional magnesium on top of that to hopefully eliminate me from ever having to dose magnesium, calcium, or alkalinity to this tank. So overall, I believe I used around 4 or 5 pounds of the aragonite media with around a cup full of the magnesium flakes to fill up this reactor. So now that the reactor's full of media, everything's reassembled, we can give it one last look over before we put it on the tank. As far as what's left to do, the first one is going to be adding the pH probe. We'll add that once it's upstairs, once it's full of water. Lock that nut in place and it should stop it from leaking. Everything else is going to be done with all push connect fittings, which makes life so easy, including the input. Now the input is going to be fed from the actual manifold, as I said before. Everything push connect, so it should be easy to route that hose and even easier to remove it later down the line when it comes time for maintenance. So that's enough. Let's go ahead and get this thing on the tank. You know, during my brief time in this hobby, there's one thing I've learned above all else. Whenever you plan ahead and try to stay proactive, you always save yourself time and energy. In a situation like mine where I had a manifold designed for one piece of equipment, including something as simple as a union or a true union ball valve, allowed me to switch out the pieces of equipment without taking everything offline. So I guess the moral of the story is, plan ahead, include extra outlets, include plenty of unions in your plumbing, so that way if you do want to make additions or changes, it makes your life a whole lot easier. Now in my situation, I was lucky enough to have just enough room for this reactor to fit in and out of my sump without too much trouble. Others may not be that fortunate, so don't forget to measure, measure twice, don't guess, and make sure that everything's going to work out. Even though these push connect fittings are designed to make things easier, the actual rigid hose that you use with it really didn't help me out in my situation. Things were a little tighter, a little harder to navigate around, and with it being so rigid, it really didn't make it easy. So what I ended up having to do was switch out a few different hosing and actually remove one of the pins that locks the push connect in place on the reactor to help give me the angle and the leverage needed to push it tight enough to where it didn't leak. So overall, small headache, but it wasn't something I couldn't remedy. Now, when it comes to your output or your influent line from the calcium reactor, there is some significance on where you place it in your system. Now, in my situation, putting it in a high flow, basically the first chamber of my sump, is really going to benefit me. Keep in mind, the pH coming out of the calcium reactor is normally very low, 6.5 or so. The tank's pH is usually around 8. Now, if you mix them together in a situation where there's not enough flow to gas off or to equalize that out, it will affect your main display. So in my situation, I'm going to put it in the first chamber to hopefully help it. And I'm also going to use pH probes in the calcium reactor and on the display to help me monitor this situation. Now, if it ends up not working, I do have other things I can try. One of which is routing it to the actual algae scrubber, which is something I'm wanting to try. Another thing is try putting it in a cup with an air stone. There are multiple different ways. A lot of YouTubers I've used that have been successful. So, the story's open on this. Definitely not ending yet, but we'll cover that more in part 3 whenever we get to tuning this calcium reactor. The main goal for me with this tank is just trusting the process and not rushing anything. So the next step is just going to be letting this thing run with water. Not worrying about tuning it, not worrying about putting CO2 on it, but literally just flushing the system. Flushing all the media of any detritus, debris, or anything else that's trapped inside of it. Flushing any air that's trapped inside of it, and getting it to the point to where it's actually ready to be dialed in. That may take a day or a couple of days. Not in a hurry on that by any means. So at this point, I would say mission is accomplished. We got media in the reactor. We don't have any leaks. Water's running through it from the manifold, and it's slowly purging any air or anything that's trapped inside the media. I would say things are right on track. So what's next? Well, hopefully we have this calcium reactor running here soon. The main goal is to break this up into 3 episodes, with the third one being the last major pieces of equipment. The CO2 tank, getting it filled, the regulator, hooking that up to the actual calcium reactor, melting the media, monitoring the pH. All of those things are going to come in episode 3 when we finally dive in to me getting my feet wet with actually dosing my tank with a calcium reactor. So for now, hopefully this helps show anyone that anyone can do it. It's not hard. A couple push connect fittings, and that's it. So as always, guys, hey, definitely like, comment, subscribe. You guys keep doing what y'all do. Y'all be easy. Happy reefing.